Welcome back to this week's edition of Political Paradigms. My name's Toby. I'm joined as always by Theo. Theo, hello.
Hello.
And I'm joined by a guest host today. We'll see how this goes. Sunny, hello.
Hello there.
Welcome along to Political Paradigms. Have you been listening to previous episodes?
Yeah, definitely, mate. Always.
I
I'm a
don't
big
believe
fan. No, I'm very, very excited to be here. Very excited to give my incredibly useful and important opinion on the matter.
Do you feel like you have some unique insight you'll be offering us today?
Honestly, mate, I don't know. It's good. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe I do have some insight which I've forgotten about, and I'll share it with the group if I remember, or if there is something else. But yeah.
It's going to be three middle-class blokes talking about politics in the run-up to Christmas. Let's do it.
More of what you guys need.
But it is pretty diverse, three middle-class blokes, because we have the North, Middle, South, and Spain covered. So,
Yeah.
there's diversity in our numbers.
That third region of the UK, Spain.
I'm not telling you. I'm not telling you which of us is from where.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. My fellow Northerners disavow me. I sound too posh for them, so I'm not even a real Northerner, am I? All right. Story number one. Want to talk about the Rwanda policy? Bit of an anticlimactic finale to that vote. It was always expected to go through easily, and then on the day, sort of all the journalists in the Westminster Village got very excited. Were like, "Oh my God, the government's going to fail." Passed with a healthy majority. The Tory right turned out to be a bit of a paper tiger, but the Tory right and the One Nation bit of the party are sort of at odds, and they're saying when it's time for amendments in January, the Tory right wants to toughen it up or they won't vote for it, and then like 100 MPs in sort of the middle of the party, the left of the party as it were, are saying if you toughen it up we won't vote for it either. So it kind of right now on paper looks like there's no way Sunak can win, and sort of all these divisions will be back with a vengeance in January. Do you guys think it's realistic that this bill can survive sort of the amendment stage, or do you think it's had a stay of execution and it is going to die? I'll start with you, Theo.
Probably, but I think there'll probably be a lot of concessions to the right, because obviously, everybody wants to at least do something on immigration. All the Tories know it's in their best interest, but the right will definitely want to get their opinion in the amendment stage, because obviously with the Supreme Court defeat, there's a big threat of other branches of the government coming in and essentially thwarting the process. And they're the ones whose constituents, are essentially lobbying them about this more than any other issue.
And obviously, at the same time, the Tories have been raising the salience of this issue. So now, for Conservative voters in particular, immigration is a really salient deciding issue. And a lot of them will stay home if something meaningful isn't done by the election. And even if this policy gets through, it looks unlikely numbers will move significantly by the time of the election. Sonny, is there any way they can win here?
By winning, you're saying, can they get this Rwanda policy through?
And achieve a visible win from the perspective of the public.
Well, okay, look, this is my opinion on the matter.
Okay.
This whole policy is purely them trying to look like the big tough people, and they're going to lead the country in the next. They're going to say, "Oh, we win if we win the election. We're going to be tough on immigration. We're going to be tough on this. We're going to bring Britain back to this great heyday, which it hasn't been since before the First World War." And so in the heyday that they're talking about. And so this whole Rwanda policy is just them trying to look big. And the fact of the matter is that most politicians I've talked to or seen them talk about it are saying more and more that they're not even going to get flights off by the next election, especially if it's going to be a May election. And from what I've heard, there's no inkling that the Tories are going to try and leave it as late as possible to January 2025. That's probably not going to happen. And so I think Rishi Sunak is in a position in which he really wanted to try and get this as the flagship kind of policy, and maybe that's why he wanted to bring in. Maybe that's why he went with James Cleverly as Home Secretary, because Cleverly, off the top of my head, he's not really hasn't been that hated recently. I think as Foreign Secretary, sometimes you're a lot less in the limelight. Sometimes you're very much in the news. Yeah, I don't even see it as much of a victory, even if the Rwanda policy is passed, because I think it's just not going to really happen. I mean, it's been hundreds of millions of pounds already. They've potentially might get 1,000 people. I mean, that sounds a lot to me. 1,000 people going on this new system before the next election, and that's hundreds of millions of pounds. I think it's been an absolute catastrophe for them. So I don't think they can win now. It's dead in the water.
Yeah, and this is all in the scenario where they get it through Parliament, because, of course, failing to get your flagship policy through Parliament when you have a nominal, 60, 70 seat majority, it's probably down to about 60 now, is just very embarrassing. There's another by-election coming up in a Blackpool seat. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it looks like an MP is in considerable trouble for some dodgy dealings with regards to the gambling industry. So, and that's almost a certain Labour pickup, because it's like a 3,000 majority, kind of a red wall-ish seat. Although
we're about to have our own George Santos.
If you like, I suppose. I don't think anything can top George Santos, but it is. We've had a few interesting characters. We've had Tractor Man. We had a few dodgy MPs this Parliament, haven't we? And sort of that list is being added to. I was reading something in the New Statesman the other day, basically pointing out that, like, in terms of MPs' resignations for scandal, this is almost a record-breaking Parliament. Like, even at the end of the John Major Parliament, they didn't have this many sort of MPs sort of dropping out like flies to various scandals.
Including the former Prime Minister, who's not even allowed on the Westminster Palace premises anymore.
I mean, that in of itself is just not hysterical, because it's depressing, but it is just bizarre, isn't it? And yeah, Rwanda, very difficult policy to get through. He's sort of between a rock and a hard place. I don't know what Sunak thinks the strategy is from here, because it does look on paper like he cannot get this through because he will annoy one group and they won't vote for it, or another group and they won't vote for it. And the political pressure on Labour for blocking it is kind of being moved away because A, the public is so incredulous and doesn't think it can be delivered, and B, the focus in the media is obviously going to be on the Tories opposing it. You can't go, oh, Labour have blocked this, when like half the Tories might have blocked it as well. So, interesting times ahead. On to sort of the politics, and we will, as we head towards the end of the year, I'm sure we'll do a big wrap-up, sort of look ahead to the election podcast. But I thought we'd talk about politics and campaigning and things like that. Before I give you guys some of this reporting here, do either of you have any thoughts on the shape of the campaign ahead? Because it looks like from January we're going into full campaign mode. What are you guys expecting to see?
Well, I've got two little tidbits that I heard on the street, on the grapevine. The first thing is that some shadow ministers have been told by the party to wrap up their manifesto makings, as in, writing up potential policies and things like that, by February. So that's one aspect that we could kind of think about and look into. Something else I heard from someone, that the Tories are going to try and push for a referendum in the next election about the European Court of Human Rights, because they could potentially, there was talk about them potentially blocking Rwanda too, and then the Tories then maybe trying to have it that, the will of the people has been blocked by this, these Westminster bodies and yada yada yada, and we're going to free the parliamentary process and we're going to make it as powerful as possible. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. So that, I think, could be very interesting. But yeah, I think most people are saying we're looking at a May election.
That's interesting that you're going for May, because it does seem like you say Labour are very certain it's going to be May. But
yeah,
the Times sort of political long reads over the last few weeks have very much been saying inside government, Sunak is very dismissive of this and is saying, no, it will absolutely be October. So I don't know who's do we have reason to think the government is lying and it is going to be May?
Well, look, I
have reason to think that they're probably going to U-turn at some point. I mean, this government has U-turned a few times on a few things. And also, I think we've already seen Sunak setting up his three-word slogan for the campaign, which this party seems to love, three-word slogans, stop the boats. I mean, he's literally been holding press conferences with a big stop the boats sign in front of him on the lectern, while taking questions from journalists.
I've got something from Stephen Swinford in the Times here. Get ready for one of the longest, most expensive, and most bruising election contests in living memory. Tories plan to put Keir Starmer's record as a lefty lawyer at the centre of their campaign. Labour says it is ready for the attacks and will hit back, saying, does Sunak want to open up scrutiny on his own finances or his family finances? So it looks like Labour are going to be sort of hitting back with I saw something the other day sort of trying to tie Sunak to certain bets and withdrawals of funds he and some friends made money from just before the market crash in 2008, sort of implying he profited from it. And then the Conservative Party looks like they're going heavy. The Conservative machine is going to be trawling through Keir Starmer's legal record. Because obviously as a lawyer, you defend some unsavoury people, so they're going to be like, he defended a terrorist here, he defended a criminal here, he stopped a criminal being deported here. Do you think any of that... I mean, my instinct is, you can't move the fundamentals with sort of smears against a leader, really. You need... Sort of one of the reasons that with Jeremy Corbyn, a lot of the sort of attacks on him stuck is because it wasn't only the Conservative Party making them, it was also people within the Labour Party. People within the Labour Party aren't going to magnify these attacks. They will seem very partisan. They will seem like they're purely coming from the Conservatives. Do you think Labour or Keir Starmer have reason to worry that the Tories can land some serious blows here?
I mean, there was...
Is it all right if I go first?
Oh, go on.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, it's... Well, I mean... It's... I mean, the famous saying in politics is a week is a long time in politics. It really, I think we are seeing that a lot. If we cast back to a few weeks ago when the SNP brought forward a vote about the situation in Gaza and the Middle East, there was a couple kind of front bench and kind of highly ranked Labour MPs who went against the party stance on the matter against their leader, and people going, "Oh, what's this? Is this the rumblings and shakings of a Labour rebellion, and they're going to eat themselves? They're going to dissolve, and it's going to be terrible, and then the Tories are going to get another victory." No, not at all. I mean, I feel like that lasted like days.
Yeah.
I remember there was a shadow secretary. One of the shadow ministers wrote a letter basically saying, "I fully support Keir Starmer. I think he's the right person for the job. I just morally can't, vote the way they voted." So I think that Labour right now look in quite a solid position. I mean, this might be a bit of a different analogy, a difficult analogy to understand, but it feels a bit like a football match. We've just started the second half, and Labour's up, 3-0, and the Tories maybe it's I don't know, they won the league the last year, and it's coming up to the last game of the season, and this is a deciding match, and Labour's 3-0 up at the break, and it just feels like Labour just need to keep their heads cool and calm, and I mean the Tories will probably say everything and anything they can. I think they believe that they maybe have a chance. I don't think they do really have a chance. I don't know if we could see a landslide victory for Labour, but I could definitely see a victory, and maybe a coalition. But yeah, no, I think Labour's in a very good position to kind of just keep their heads cool. As long as we don't see a 1992, they should be all right, I believe.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing is, sort of looking at the Labour Party and where they are, whatever problems come up for them, whether it's divisions about the situation in the Middle East, whether it's attacks on Keir Starmer or Keir Starmer's definitely lacklustre and underwhelming personal ratings, he would be the least popular leader of the opposition to unseat an incumbent Prime Minister. It just helps that Rishi Sunak is one of the least popular Prime Ministers in living memory. All this is going on, but it would require, from where we are in the polls now, a swing unparalleled in recent electoral history towards the government. the biggest swings in the last year of an election campaign, even if we give them a year from now, which is unlikely, it'll be less than a year really. The biggest swings we've seen back towards the government have dwarfed what would be required for the government to even, have a hung parliament, be the largest party. And even that is a scenario where Keir Starmer is still Prime Minister.
Sunak's not going to do that with like talking about Starmer's personal record. I mean, we've talked on the podcast endlessly about the situation Sunak's in. There's basically nothing he can do. And if he wants to go into public records, Starmer, a lawyer with some questionable convictions compared to himself, former Goldman Sachs guy, hedge fund manager, just the embodiment of everything people don't like about Tory politicians. It's not a fair match, even if they're just fighting on that and they're not, Sunak's already in his incredibly low electoral position. He's not going to pull himself out by mentioning, the prosecution or the lack of prosecution Starmer made against that police officer that was controversial or something like that. It's not a fair fight. But yeah, as Sonny said, they're going to be putting out pretty much everything they can, probably in vain, and they probably know it.
Do you think they know?
Yeah,
it?
sorry. Oh, sorry, I interrupted.
Do you think they know it? Do you think they're just pretending that they think they can win? This is just damage limitation.
Yeah, look, the things you're hearing in the Tory party. We're hearing a lot of leaks of what Tory MPs have said. I had dinner with a Tory MP last year, and just his whole attitude towards it was, I'm probably going to lose my seat. The party's probably screwed. It was a good run, and that was a year ago. And then you add on everything that's happened since then. It's And it's just whispering for the party. Obviously, Sunak has to maintain a good front, but look at PMQs. Keir Starmer isn't even opening with questions anymore. It's just jibe after jibe after jibe. It's just it's the twilight of this Tory government, and they're just a sitting duck at the moment.
Sorry, go on, Sonny.
I was going to say, sorry. Kind of in some ways reminds me of the 2020 US elections, where it felt less like a straight kind of straight Biden versus Trump. It was more like a referendum on do we still want Trump, and it feels a lot like that. But this time it feels even more kind of just dire for the government. In this case, the Conservatives. So yeah, sorry, that was just one bit.
Looking at favourability, this was another big story, and I was going to save it for when we look at some other polling data, but I think I'll slip this in here. So Rishi Sunak has fallen to his worst ever net favourability rating, hitting lows comparable to the nadir of Boris Johnson's premiership. His rating is now -49, making him officially as unpopular as the Conservative Party brand overall. Boris Johnson's low was -46. And then he went down to -53 a month later after he'd already resigned. The only person who's ever gone lower than Sunak and Johnson is Liz Truss at -70. Keir Starmer has fallen in his ratings. He's at -22. Labour is on -14. So the most popular brand in the country is the Labour Party. The second most popular brand, though unpopular, is Keir Starmer. And the least popular brands in the country are joint tie between Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party.
Yeah, it's looking pretty rough for the Conservative Party in the next election. And yeah, I think it's interesting though, because I think part of the Conservatives are probably thinking that a lot of the European elections have gone recently to quite a kind of more right wing than we normally see in the world. Like in the Netherlands, I don't know much about the election that's going on or went on. I can't remember if it has or hasn't happened yet. But it was quite a far right affair compared to what we're normally used to seeing in countries like the EU and Argentina with their most recent president, who seems to be slightly mad. So I think there's probably some people in the Conservative Party on the far right, or on the far right, thinking, this is the stance we should take and we'll be able to pull out some sort of miracle. But I just don't see it.
Yeah, and I do see a path in this country for sort of not like a European style far right, but like a Faragista far right sort of radical right political project. But I think it requires a couple of things. And I think the reason that couldn't happen, even if you made a relatively popular sort of right-wing figure, Conservative Party leader, is because the brand of the Conservative Party would hold it back, an establishment brand. I think that we might have our European moment in the event that we have an unpopular Labour government and the Conservative Party is supplanted by something else on the right. That's where I'd say this could have real momentum.
I wonder what that could be.
Oh, something beginning with the letter R, maybe? I don't know. Maybe.
Some dude who lives in the jungle, I think.
Some party that's polling at about 10% in the polls right now. Yeah.
Is it the Recover Party or something?
Yeah.
The Renew Party.
Reform. Maybe it's them. Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, I do think the scenario where, and we've said this before, the scenario where, and I think the Conservatives can probably squeeze a lot of the Reform vote back to them by the time of the election. If Nigel Farage jumps back into the arena, gets back involved, I think you see the Conservative vote maybe split in half. 15% are voting Reform, 20% are voting Conservative. That is wipeout. That is Labour have 500 seats on like a 40% vote share. That is the nightmare scenario. And it's so plausible in a way that it shouldn't be. And I just think that's why Sunak feels like he needs to tilt to the right. But I think what he doesn't realise is the problem is the Conservatives. It's not even the Conservative policy prospectus. The Conservative record in office and just the brand is hung around their necks like an anvil around their necks, basically. They're not going to be able to defy that gravity, no matter what they do.
Yeah, I also think that the far right isn't as big as a lot of people think. Like when Braverman was removed as Home Secretary, it felt like there was two groups of people who had an opinion on her. Part of it was she's going to lead the far right of the party to, they're getting bigger, they're getting stronger, they're more disgruntled. And the other one was like, she has 3 supporters and it's like a plant on her desk and a book. So I think it's interesting, but I'm not fully convinced the far right in the Conservative Party is as big as we want to think about, as we think. And I also think that David Cameron or Lord Cameron coming back was really weird because he's very much a centrist figure.
Yeah,
he was, and he still is. Like he hasn't. It's not like he's gone. It's not like Sunak went, "Hi, Dave, want to come back? By the way, we're more right wing now. You're going to have to lean towards that." Like he hasn't. It's just a really weird position the Conservatives are in right now. Like it's just like it still feels like they haven't fully decided if they're going to try and fight in the north in the Red Wall, or kind of run back to the Shires and try and rally the troops down south. We'll start seeing where they're standing when we see where they're campaigning hardest, when the start of the campaign kind of circus happens.
There is the other interesting trend at the moment is the Conservative vote is static, right? So that the Tories are down on about 25%, which is apocalyptic. About 10% of the vote-ish are going to Reform at the moment. Again, I think they can squeeze that. The other trend is, and it's either good for Labour or bad, I'll leave it to you guys to decide. Labour's vote has dropped a bit. They've gone from like 46, 47% to like 43, 44%. In some polls, they're on 40%. That vote goes down. The Tories don't go up at all. It's going to the Greens. It's going to the Lib Dems, and maybe ever so slightly to Reform. Again, some of that is stuff Labour can squeeze back. Is Labour's vote dropping a good sign because it's their vote spreading more efficiently? A similar thing happened in 97. Labour went down, but the Lib Dems went up, and that actually helped Labour and damaged the Tories? Or is this a problem and Labour are losing like a little bit of their base for a number of reasons? Gaza, disillusionment with Keir Starmer. Obviously, it's a small segment of the Labour base that would be moved by these things, but obviously statistically significant because on a lot of the polling averages, some more than others, you see the Tory line stable at 25%. The Labour line has actually had a drop in the last month. What do you guys think, Theo?
I still don't think it will change, holistically the outcome of the election. But
Of
obviously,
course.
these things can make a difference under first past the post. Obviously, this can make a big difference in a few seats. I can't see the Greens, really making a big comeback, but they could split the Labour vote and create some problems. As could the Lib Dems, maybe the SNP up in Scotland. But look, if that's going to happen, what reform is going to do to the Tory vote is going to be a lot worse. I promise.
Are you on team efficiency, it's good for Labour, or are you on team on balance, it's bad?
I'd say efficiency, probably.
Efficiency. Okay. Yeah.
It's just first past the post.
Sonny, are you on team sort of efficiency? The Lib Dems will probably do better if Labour's vote goes down, or are you on team, no, it splits the Labour vote, this is bad?
Well, okay. I think
I'm going to come out as a member of, on balance, team efficiency. I think it's too soon to tell, but I don't think Labour going down necessarily helps the Conservatives.
No, I think that the problems the Conservatives have will not be remedied by what is a relatively small drop compared to what they need for Labour. I mean, any chance that the Tories have is that they need some sort of, well, for them, miracle that Labour drop like 25-30%, and they're not going to.
Yeah,
I think it's what it is just partly that the statistics and the polls are just leveling out, in which we have these spikes in which when the Tories were at their lowest, maybe. I don't know, when they were kind of the least popular they've been in the last, few months, then the Labour vote will rise, and then it will dip, and then it will rise. I think that it's a very interesting position for what the Labour Party is in right now, because they do have a bit of a split. I do feel like it is more efficiency, though, and I would like to see a larger Lib Dem, because I think it's just healthier for the parliamentary system overall.
I agree.
So yeah, I guess I'm on team.
Yeah, we've severely lacked pluralism in the last 10 years. I will say.
I agree, and I also think a Labour majority of like 200 or something. I'd almost rather a little bit more pluralism. I don't think a massive Labour majority will serve that so much.
I don't know what Starmer would do when that kind of power gets to his head, honestly.
I mean, I think this is the thing. Is it ever good?
I don't think he'll do anything.
No, this is... yeah.
We're bombing the United States tomorrow morning.
I don't think you can expect much of anything. I do keep telling people this. Don't expect a lot when Labour get in, because you'll be disappointed.
Oh no, it will be. It will be a lot of like admin in the civil service, like just undoing tiny little clauses and things like that. It's 13 years of government to unpick. It's always a big task.
I think
there'll be lots of 3-page bills going through by the government.
We're going to hand a massive, earth-shattering historical parliamentary majority to a party offering calm managerialism. That's what's about to happen. And we'll see the effects of
at the same time.
In the age of populism. We're going to do that.
No, I think what we're seeing and what we saw from Boris Johnson, probably the most populist out of the three, kind of, out of Liz. I mean, I don't think we can even take anything from Liz's time as Prime Minister.
No, but she wasn't she wasn't populist. No, we can put that.
Well, she wasn't popular, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, also, I think what we saw with Johnson was kind of just a bit. It was just a bit sickening. I felt just a bit sick watching him be Prime Minister, and the way he conducted himself, and the way things were rewriting the parliamentary code. Like, it's there for a reason. I think the British parliamentary system, I think this is a whole different conversation, but I think there's it feels in some ways the parliamentary system is a bit weak, and the only way that it works is that everyone just accepts that we could just rip it apart, but we're not going to. We're just gonna be British about this. We're just gonna go along with the standard channels. So yeah, I think it'll be a refreshing, although maybe quite bland overall leadership from the Labour Party.
Yeah, it is kind of, it feels, you know, this whole political year for me, because I'm sad, has been waiting for the election, right? I've been like, right, 2023 is a write-off, 2024 is where it's at. We're finally approaching 2024. We're months away from the first Labour government of our, like, adult lives. And it does feel like no one's quite come to terms with that yet. It is going to be a big psychological shift.
No, it is weird because I think the only memory I have of the Labour Party is watching Gordon Brown with his kids walk out of number 10 into the car and
were you there,
drive off.
Sonny? Were you there, Sonny?
Yeah, well, I was there. I was watching it on the television, on the TV, and that's the only thing I could think about with Labour. Yeah, that's it. The rest is here. The rest, it feels like it almost feels like mythical in some ways. Yeah, yeah. What do you think the next Labour government is going to stand for and act? How active, and what do you think they're going to look for?
I think there's two scenarios. Scenario number one, which I view as the most likely, and I'll go to you next for some insight, Theo. I like to keep it balanced on here. My insight,
Yeah, of course.
my insight is scenario number one. Keir Starmer is telling us what he's going to do. Most of Labour spending policies will be cut back. There will not be significant increases in spending on public services, which may be catastrophic short term. And the big problem with it is, whereas in 1997 the economy was pretty good and Labour could coast for a few years before making hard choices on public spending, if they go in the austere direction they're currently promising, I think it opens them up, not necessarily to challenge from the Tories, because the Tories will be in such a state, particularly post-leadership contest. It opens them up to significant slippage on the one side to the Lib Dems and the Greens, and on the other side to sort of an emerging populist right-wing force. And I think that could open some very troubling political currents in this country. Scenario number two is Keir Starmer looks at the problems both the centre-left and the centre-right are seeing around the world, is able to be quite politically prescient, and once in office decides we are going to have to make some hard choices on taxes, and we are going to have to try and materially deliver for our voter coalition and hold it together to sort of stave off a populist rebellion against the Labour government sort of 3 or 4 years down the line. Theo, do you think I'm on the money here?
Yes, but I'm not too sure. I think scenario 2 sounds decently accurate, but I'm not too sure whether he would feel threatened by a populist force in the Labour Party. I mean, I know a lot can shift quite quickly, but honestly, I think the last remnant of 2019 was essentially the Corbynite momentum faction being buried for for a fairly long time.
It's buried
and I think
for at least
he could easily approach
decades.
this with, come on guys, we just got elected and you're going to go right back to the government that got us trampled by none other than Boris Johnson. I mean,
I think that's why a non-Tory force would be worrying. I absolutely don't think it would be from sort of the Corbynite left. I think it would probably be from sort of the Farageist right, combining like right-wing cultural positioning with populist left-wing economics, because reform is already starting to go a little bit left of Labour. They're promising nationalisation. There was some talk of taxation on wealth. They've sort of rode back on that. If a sort of right-wing radical force can combine that with sort of left-wing economics, I think that could be fatal to both major parties. Sort of following, if you like, the Francois Hollande ification of a Keir Starmer government.
Well, I think the first few things that Starmer's going to have to look at once, I say potentially, but
99.9%, etc.
Yeah, so there's still a potential. I don't want to be caught out. But anyway, I think one of the first things the Prime Minister will have to look at after the election is what they're doing about the economy, because I mean it wasn't really doing anything. It wasn't growing. It wasn't shrinking. If I'm correct, you're gonna chase me up on these statistics. I'm not gonna don't hold them to me. But there were kind of crazy statistics coming out since 2008. The UK economy has only grown by 1.5%, and productivity has only been up by 1.5%, and in the Economic Party of England hasn't fixed it. I mean, cutting national insurance, like, what is that? All right, mate. Calm down, Jeremy Hunt. You're not really a genius, are you? So I don't know how much of a kind of slow approach the Labour Party can take, because I mean, there's also people talking about with the spring budget that the Tories are just going to go kind of crazy to try and jeopardize Labour's first few years as the government, if the Tories can't just do all these crazy things which actually are not very good for the economy, and then when Labour take it over, they're kind of are in the middle of a kind of small financial crisis type thing. I think the economy is going to be a massive part, and I think that plays into Labour's hands, because I don't think the Tories have really done anything since 2010 about really growing the economy.
Yeah, it's all about the economic fundamentals, and that is the only bright spot for the government, which is, yes, it looks like we might have a recession next year. Never good for an election year. But, this is the bright spot, guys. But currently wages are outpacing inflation for the first time in quite a while, and you could see some green shoots by the end of the year. Sort of combine tax cuts with real incomes rising, and people won't be in the dire position in terms of how the economy feels that they are right now. And I think that is something that could maybe, help them a little bit. The political brand is in tatters. In 1997, you had real economic growth happening and it still didn't save them. But I do think that they'd be best clinging on to that and going, Britain's booming, don't let Labour ruin it. But basically Britain isn't quite falling apart, don't let Labour mess it up. And that is probably
Britain's recovering,
Exactly. Don't let Labour destroy the recovery, sort of 2015 style. They're not doing that. They're just talking about Rwanda. And I feel like that's making their position much worse than it would be if they'd gone with the original strategy, which was Sunak is calm, he's competent, and he's just going to talk about the economy non-stop. I think they'd probably be polling a few points higher than they are right now if they'd stuck to that.
I think the only problem with that argument, to me, it seems very weak, because they could bring out all these statistics in which, we're doing this and we're doing that. It's a 6-year high and a 6-year low for this. It's like, yes, this was the Conservative Party damaging the economy, now slightly recovered. So they have dipped, and then we kind of almost got back to normal. Oh no! One of the best clips, which must be a year old now, so I feel like I'm just rummaging through the kind of ancient service, but Suella Braverman saying we have a record high amount of police officers, 103,000 more police officers, or 130,000 more police officers. And the newsagent says, yes, you are correct, because you cut 130 police officers in the last government, so actually you only have 3,000 more officers than you did in 2010, which is it's a complete fallacy. It's just, when you look upon it like that, the Tories have just about recovered from what they did in the first place. But anyway, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, that strategy requires people deleting everything else from their brains and just looking at macroeconomic indicators in 3 months before an election, which isn't really how voters' economic memories work. People sort of look at the last 2 years generally, I think the political science shows. Before we wrap up today's pod, and again, we're probably back for 1 or 2 more not before Christmas, but before the end of the year. So we're not going anywhere, don't worry. But and then obviously loads more in 2024. Very interesting figure, Nigel Farage. He's back on the political scene. He's out of the jungle. What does 2024 herald for Nigel Farage, Thea?
I think he could launch his thing,
His thing.
I mean, there's been whatever Farage is about to pull out the bag. I think he might announce it very early in the year. He's probably listening just as eagerly to the wall of Downing Street as we are at the moment, and probably calculating, when to either launch his Tory leadership bid or his announcement that Reform is going to go on a full-on, all-out campaign for the election. He's going to play a role in this election, as he did in the last one, but I think this time as an adversary of the Tories, and this time not on the issue of Brexit. He's essentially been unleashed into the wild with all his attributes that make him popular to some people, and he could wreak havoc. And I think he knows that, and I think he wants back in.
I agree. Do you guys think that Mr. Farage is absolutely going to reinsert himself? And do you think... I mean, I guess this is the guy that has the ability, if he really wants to destroy the Conservative Party. I know Richard Tice is saying that, but it's Richard Tice. If Nigel Farage comes back in, becomes a major player in Reform UK again, and goes, we are absolutely, I agree, I'm going to use my public platform to bring about sort of the annihilation of the Tories will be on below 100 seats within a year, right? If Nigel Farage directs all his energy, that's going to be much more powerful than sort of how Reform is doing right now. Sonny, if you were Rishi Sunak, would you be desperately trying to stop Nigel Farage jumping back in the arena?
Well, I've already talked about it before, but I'm going to have to talk about it again. I don't think because it feels like they haven't decided where they're going to fight the next election. If they're going to push for this kind of more far right, stop the boats type thing, or not, because again, I still find Cameron really confusing being there. Except for he does have quite a lot of clout, and he's physically quite a tall guy, which
he needs the heft. The big guns are being brought
there's
out.
Things about
Rishi Sunak ain't gonna cut at 5'6".
This supports my James Cleverley theory. Quite big guy. Make him Tory
How big
leader.
is he? Huge. Get Dominic Robin. Have you seen the size of him?
Yeah, they're quite hench. You need a hench cabinet.
Anyway.
Sorry, I was going to say that I think Farage's... I didn't really watch much or keep up with Farage's time in the jungle, but it didn't feel like a roaring success for him. I think the money obviously was probably nice, don't get me wrong. So I think that Rishi is going to be very wary of him because he still has a massive say and he's still massively popular with a lot of kind of anti-immigrants. But no, I don't know if we can tell right now what his stance is. But I think overall he's not going to be a big fan of Farage, I would say. I
do also think it's worth noting, among 2019 Conservative Party voters, Rishi Sunak is now net unpopular. Nigel Farage is net popular. So Nigel Farage is more popular among 2019 Conservative voters than Rishi Sunak. Something to watch. In my opinion, they should be quite scared. Theo and Sonny, thank you very much for getting involved with today's podcast.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm sure we'll all speak again very soon.
Definitely. It was very fun. Thank you very much for having me on. I've really enjoyed myself.